We'll begin, nonetheless, with a story that has received a little bit less attention in this country than you might have expected, but it is the hoops through which we will all be required to jump potentially in the future should we want to visit the United States of America, Simon.
Yes, absolutely, James. And I think it is important to pay attention to this, especially as we enter what is going to be a big year here in the United States of America. America's 250th birthday, which is going to be marked across the next 12, 13 months. But also, of course, America, along with Canada and Mexico, hosting the World Cup. So there will be many people in the UK thinking, I fancy heading over because I want to see some of these World Cup matches. We learnt yesterday that anybody applying for an ESTA, that's the basic document that you need to fill out in order to be allowed to engage in visa-free travel to the United States. Anyone, even from countries like the UK, France, South Korea, from which the United States permits visa-free travel, will be required to submit now 5 years of social media history as part of their application for an ESTA. Up until now, the form has required you to, has asked you rather, to disclose the various social media accounts that you operate and the handles that you use, but it hasn't required you to provide them. Now it's going to require you to provide those handles dating back over the last 5 years. You don't have to send in, shed loads of documents showing what you've posted on those accounts. But the government has the right, of course, to scrutinise those accounts. And clearly they wouldn't be requiring the disclosure if they didn't plan to take a look. So this is going to be a burdensome move on the part of bureaucrats who oversee the issuing of these ESTAs so that people can engage in visa-free travel. But it's also going to be a choice now that travellers from the UK are going to face. Do you really want to give the Trump administration details of your social media activity over the last 5 years so that they can scrutinise it? Or will you say to yourself, you know what, they've got those World Cup games in Canada and Mexico. I think I'll go there instead and give the United States a swerve in 2026.
Yeah, I've seen California tourism authorities predicting a 9% decline in foreign visits to the state this year. That's probably optimistic. But do we know why they're doing it? Have they provided any... We can speculate, and we may do in a moment, but is there any official indication of what the rationale is behind this?
Well, the official rationale for previously asking people voluntarily to disclose their social media account handles was because the United States government has the right, as all governments do, to decide who enters the country and who does not. And certainly we have seen social media accounts being scrubbed over the course of this year, particularly by the United States for any avowed expressions of support for Hamas, for example, in the Gaza conflict. Now, it is also, if we move into the speculative realm, apparent that at a time of a complete crackdown here on, for example, refugee applications, asylum applications, I mean, America's doors, the country that was built by immigrants, the Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island, all of that history, the country's doors are now basically closed to everybody, as you and I have previously discussed, with the exception of white Afrikaners seeking refuge. I mean, it is apparent that this government wants to start looking at people's backgrounds to see whether their viewpoints align with those of President Trump and the United States government. And where that line gets drawn, where they say, well, your viewpoints don't align with President Trump, if it goes beyond simply things that you've said about the situation in the Middle East, and, we simply don't know where that line is going to be drawn. But, they wouldn't be requiring all of these social media handles if they didn't intend to take a look at least some of them.
Well, I mean, the problem is with these questions that I ask you is that even if you answer in a certain way today, we could be here in a month and your answer would have been rendered obsolete, because obviously I want to know, and my listeners will want to know, whether merely expressing rather well-founded and evidence-based negative opinions about Donald Trump and his administration might prompt some sort of immigration problem in the future?
I think one has to conclude that that is a distinct possibility.
Yeah. Otherwise,
certainly earlier in the year... Certainly earlier in the year, we saw Marco Rubio at the State Department, for example, going after several foreign students in the United States and threatening to throw them out and revoking their visas, although I think most of them in the end had their visas restored, but threatening to throw them out simply for participating in protests on university campuses during the course of this year relating to the crisis in Gaza. In at least one case, detaining a student simply because she had written an editorial for a student newspaper, absolutely covered by the First Amendment and its freedom of speech protections, but an editorial criticising the university for failing to divest from Israel. So the bar was pretty low during the course of this year for things that irked the Trump administration. And as we head into what I say is going to be a big year, should be a very big year in terms of tourist visits to the United States. And this goes beyond simply celebrating the 250th birthday of the World Cup. You might be invited to a conference. You might be thinking of attending a scientific conference or a conference on climate change and the environment, or a conference relating to, the other dirty words here now, like inclusivity. And you may find yourself being told by the Trump administration, I'm very sorry, some of the stuff you've said on social media is triggering for us, and we're not going to give you a visa and allow you to an ESTA, I should say, and allow you to come in.
Well, I love the use of the word triggering there, because, of course, the people who've been whining about compromising and attacks on freedom of speech for the longest time will be signally silent about this, which is a very real and very dangerous attack potentially on freedom of speech. When exactly, because I've got a couple more questions to get through, so short answer to this one, please. When does it potentially kick in?
I think in the new year. I think it will start, very, very soon. This is not something that Congress is going to be required to weigh in on. This is just an administrative change, and they'll simply change the box that says optional when it comes to social media.
Yeah, because it is currently
accounts to required.
It is currently on the form, but it is optional, and as of next year, it won't be, should this plan continue on the path it's currently on. Speaking of things that people might think twice about saying on social media if this or when this policy is brought in, the administration has taken up piracy now, I gather.
Well, that is certainly the view of the Venezuelan government. This astonishing disclosure yesterday by President Trump that the United States has seized a Venezuelan oil tanker. It's called the Skipper. This gives us an indication of why the largest aircraft carrier in the world, the USS Gerald Ford, has been deployed in the waters of the Caribbean. According to the government, this tanker is a sanctioned vessel. That's clear. It is indeed a sanctioned vessel by the United States. They say it has been engaging in illicit oil trade involving both Venezuela and Iran, sanctioned oil that in the past they argue has generated revenue for Hezbollah and for the Islamic Revolutionary Guards in Iran. Why they suddenly seized this is a big question. It comes at a time, of course, when President Trump is actively threatening to overthrow President Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. Indeed, yesterday put the Colombian government on notice that their leadership will be next, he said. And when he was asked yesterday at the White House what happens to the oil on board this vessel, he said, I don't know, I guess we keep it. All of this fuels the notion that what the United States is really after in Venezuela is the country's oil, largest oil reserves anywhere in the world. And it also may be deflecting attention away from the extrajudicial killing that the United States has been engaged in on the high seas in those multiple attacks, over 20 of them, on speedboats that without proof they claim have been ferrying narcotics to the United States from Venezuela.
Without proof, and that story still bubbling away in the context of promises to reveal footage and then a failure or refusal to reveal footage. We're out of time, but one more. this all falls into the same news cycle pretty much as the decision to pardon the former Honduran president, who was a massive and proven drug trafficker.
Yeah, absolutely. Voluminous.
Yes.
After voluminous amounts of work by Department of Justice prosecutors to bring him to justice, he's now walked free. President Trump maintaining that he was a victim of injustice, although there's absolutely no evidence to support that. In fact, the Honduran government has immediately said, we want to get our hands on him because we'll prosecute him and jail him if you, the United States, will not. But the dissonance here between an American president who's going after Venezuela, accusing President Nicolas Maduro of being himself a drug kingpin, something that the Venezuelan leader denies, while simultaneously releasing from jail the former Honduras leader, who was proved in court to have been engaged in drug trafficking activities. There is no clarity surrounding policy here, particularly when it comes to this array of pardons and prison releases that Donald Trump has been making since he arrived in office. Very quixotic. And what he's really trying to do, I think, is demonstrate that former presidents should not be held accountable for their actions while they were in power, for reasons, of course, that may one day come to benefit him.
It's the oligarch club. Thank you, Simon Marks, live from Washington, D.C. And in conclusion, just to put a little flesh on one of the bones that he brought to us, why wouldn't you, given what we have just learned or discovered, why wouldn't you want to give this administration not just your social media activity potentially for the past 5 years, but any phone number that you've used over the same period, the email addresses that you've used for a decade, your face, fingerprint, DNA and iris biometrics, the names, addresses, birth dates and birthplaces of all family members, including children, will be required as well. As we mentioned a moment ago, no doubt all of the people who whine endlessly about free speech because they're cross about women who want hotels full of human beings to be burnt to the ground while the human beings are still inside them, being quite rightly sent to jail, will be around any minute now to object in the most furious of terms about this obscene infringement of just about every imaginable right going. Just don't hold your breath.